Hello and welcome to my yoga class today. If you haven't already sat and made yourself a little bit of mental space to begin to practice, feel free to do that now. But we're going to go straight into the physical practice, and the first pose that we're going to do today is downward facing dog. So come to all fours on your mat, tuck your toes under, lift your knees off the floor, lift your bottom up and back. Keep your front ribs tucked under, shoulders broad and separate. Be aware of that area around the back neck to make sure that is not compressed by the shoulders rolling in. And then when you feel nice and long in the back, unfold the legs, lifting the front thigh muscles back behind you. Lengthening and lifting the back of the legs, not pushing force through the knees, but lifting to straighten the legs. So we have a lift up the arms and we have a lift up the legs. We can then extend the soles of the feet in the direction of the floor, but that is not a pushing downwards, that is an extension downwards. Keep the breath steady. You can rest any time, but if you can hold the pose steadily, then hold for just a little bit longer. Then come to your knees apart, big toes together, and bring your weight back to your heels. If you don't get a good connection between your bottom and your heels, then place a cushion or some flat yoga blocks there. Reach forwards with the hands. This is a very similar pose to the last one. Keep the shoulders wide, keep that space at the back of the neck nice and open. That's a strong similarity. And the length in the torso all the way from the crease at the base of the hips all the way to the hands is important. I'm keeping my head off the floor here so that I can be aware of trying to keep my head in line with my spine rather than bringing my chin to my chest. You can hear my voice change because I close up my throat. I'm going to keep my front neck open. Keeping my head off the floor also changes the energy of the pose and makes you a little bit more alert. Now we're going to come back up into downward facing dog. We're going to tuck the toes under, lift the knees off the floor, reach the hips up and back, and open out the backs of the legs again. Extend those heels down. Maybe it comes a little bit more easily this second time. Keep the shoulders wide, and now walk the feet forward slightly, still at least hip distance apart, maybe a little wider. Come onto your fingertips. If at this point the floor is too far, you'll have your knees bent. So take a brick or a block and bring your hands higher, but if you can keep your hands on the floor, hands are on the floor. And now again we're going to look for the relationship between downward facing dog and this pose, and it's about the length of the torso. It's about keeping space in the shoulders again, away from the ears, away from each other, straight arms. It's also lift through the legs. So now my heels are solid on the floor, but I am lifting through the front of the legs, I'm lifting through the back of the legs, opening the back of the knees but not pushing back through the knees, never pushing back through the knees, lifting the back of the knees up, lifting the front of the knees up. And then we're going to breathe in and come up slowly as we breathe out. Now we're going to do Uttanasana again a couple of times, paying attention to the placement of the feet. If you need a chair to reach the floor, or if you need blocks to reach the floor with your hands, feel free to get them, because this is going to be focusing on leg work, so you need to be stretching but fairly comfortable. Classic position of the feet is feet together. We're going to begin by taking the feet slightly apart, just to observe how that changes the stretch in your legs. So you don't have to turn the feet out very wide, just a little. You can see with my feet just a little, that would be straight. Lifting up through the legs, hinging at the hips, come forwards through the flat back and take your hands to your support, whatever that support is. Now this turns the legs slightly, and we're not doing it to turn the legs, but just to explore the stretch in slightly different parts of your legs. If this goes into any place that is injured or sensitive, then you should only work with the legs in a neutral, aligned position. So don't push into an injury. But you may find that you're not pushing into an injury, but you're finding parts of your legs that don't usually get involved in the stretch. So the principles are the same. We're lifting up the front of the legs, we're lifting up the back of the legs. The energy is going up the arms and we're lifting forward with the torso. And then just give yourself a moment to notice which parts of your legs are more challenged by this stretch. Is it the inside of the legs or the outside? Is it the backs? Is it the front? Is it the upper legs or the lower legs? You can sink into the stretch just a little bit deeper if you have that space in your body. But again, this is observing. Yoga is always observing because it is about awareness. But particularly when we're working deliberately in a not straight aligned position, make sure that you are aware of how your body is reacting, how it feels. And then let's breathe in and come up, breathing out. So that is feet slightly apart, slightly turned out. Now we're going to do feet slightly turned in. And again, it only needs to be the smallest adjustment and you should be able to observe the change in your legs. So lifting up through the legs, hands will go to support again if you need to, all the way up to the folding point of your hips, lifting up as you fold forwards. Bring your hands to the floor. Observe the weight on the soles of your feet. It may have a tendency to drop to the inner foot or to the outer foot or to one of the corners of your feet if you imagine them as rectangles. It's okay to observe that, but it isn't okay to give into it. So do your best to even up the weight on the feet. And what you might find is that that weight in the feet is actually telling you something about a part of your leg that is or isn't lifting. So again, I'm observing where the stretch is coming in my legs. And I'm trying to even that up. So if I'm finding somewhere that isn't stretching very much, then I'm trying to extend that. Not pushing into any injury places, but knowing that this might feel a little bit more unusual as it reaches parts of your legs that you don't often reach. And then breathe in and breathe out to come up. So what we're observing here is the fact that our legs will have places that have more openness and flexibility than others. Now we've done those different foot positions, we're going to do Uttanasana one last time, straightening up my mat, and we're going to do it with the classic foot position. If you feel fairly open today, you can have your feet together. Otherwise you'll have your feet slightly apart, but now your feet are parallel. Okay, so we're not turning them in or out. We're lifting up through the front of the legs and we're coming forwards. So if you learned something about openness or stiffness in your legs through the last few versions of doing this pose, if you observed something about how your legs were behaving, then you can try to work with that. So maybe you thought, actually, I never normally feel my inner legs stretch, but I can feel them in one of the variations. So try to capture that inner leg lift. Try to understand how to work the inner leg. Because this pose can be felt in just one part of the leg, quite often the hamstring, but actually it is a stretch of the entire leg. Fold deeper if you can, so going from the half pose towards what we call the full pose, full forward bend, as far as you're able to, keeping the back flat. In the last few lessons that I've uploaded, I've had a lot more focus on the back. So keeping the back flat, not rounding it and collapsing the chest, just in order to let you're going to get your head lower, or feel like it's getting your head lower. Keep your breath steady, keep your attention steady. There's been some intense work of your attention in the poses. Breathe in and then a second breath in and come up as you breathe out. We're going to go through triangle pose now. So take your feet apart. If you need some support for your hand, take it to the right side first, and that might be a chair, it might be a brick. Turn your left foot in, right foot out, torso faces the front, lift up through the legs, reach your arms wide, bring your hand down towards the floor or towards your leg. Now I'm going to rest my upper arm today because I'm going to focus on this front leg. It has a tendency to turn inwards towards the camera. So I want to make sure my foot feels even, and then I want to make sure that as I look down, my kneecap faces forwards. And I want to try and use my awareness built in the last pose to make sure I'm stretching the inner leg and the outer leg, the inside edge of the back of the leg and the outside edge of the back of the leg. So you may feel more connected to your legs than usual. Use that, lifting up through the leg. Also lifting up through the back leg, feeling steady and firm and pressing in that back foot. And then again, we'll breathe in and breathe out to come up. Keep strength in your legs as you come up. Turn the feet to the front and we'll go to the other side. So left foot comes in, right foot turns out. Heavy pressing with the back foot to your right foot this time. Broad arms lifting up through this front leg. Reach out and reach over. Bring your hand to your leg or to your support or to the floor. I'm going to rest this upper arm so that I can focus a little bit more on the legs, because my shoulder distracts me when I reach up. So today I'm not going to give myself the distraction. Instead, I'm going to focus on the front leg. So I'm exploring where I feel the stretch. I'm noticing whether my foot feels square on the floor or whether the weight is rolling in or out. When I feel I have steadiness in that foot, I'm lifting up through the front of the leg. I'm lifting up through the back of the leg. I'm noticing the parts of my leg that are involved in that stretch, and I'm noticing the parts of the leg that are less aware to me, the more dull to my awareness. Maybe they're not as involved, not as lifted. Somewhere else in my leg is picking up their slack. And then we breathe in, and then we breathe out to come up. Strong legs, steady. Feet to the front. Turn to your first side again for Baddha Konasana. So in this pose we bend the knee. We're going to rest the forearm on the thigh first of all. Place your hand as if you're carrying a tray. Place your upper arm on your hip to bring the shoulder back, and try to sink the sitting bone of the bent leg to the floor to make a right angle. If you can't go all the way down to a right angle, that's fine. Less bent may be what you can do today, no problem. I'm going to be reaching out with my back foot to try and make my foot square on the floor, reaching out with the whole of the leg, turning my torso, and then in the front leg, I'm going to make sure that between the inner thigh or inner groin and inner knee, there is stretch, there is extension, and there is drawing back between the outer knee and my bottom. So there's like a circular movement, extension out, drawing back. I look down, I see an alignment of my shoulder, my elbow, my knee and my ankle. And then we breathe in and come up. Feet to the front and to the other side. You can bring your feet in and out between sides if you need to. If you're not feeling all that energetic today, or if these poses are new and challenging on your legs. Bend the knee, bring the forearm down. Upper arm is around behind you. We'll reach it the next time around. Reach out with the back foot, extend the back leg in that direction. Turn the torso away from the floor, and then be aware of the front leg, what's happening in the front leg. Extending from the inner groin to the inner knee, and then drawing back from the outer knee to the outer hip. Looking down, I can see an alignment between my shoulder, my elbow, my knee and my ankle. I can also see that my inner knee to my inner groin is parallel with the front edge of my mat. My knee has not drifted forwards, which is a common thing that happens. And then we're going to straighten the front leg, turn the feet to the front, bring the feet together for a moment. So we're going to take that pose more into its classic shape, which is a lot more challenging. So if you do find that challenging, you can either stay with the version we just did, or you can take a brick or a chair behind your leg so that you've got something for your hand to go onto. We're going to try and get our hand towards the floor, but I am going to place a brick there in case my body doesn't want me to go all that way. So feet wide, turn to have your right leg as the front leg first of all. Straight legs to begin with, lifted torso, turn to the front, bend the knee. Come to this leaning position first, so the pose we've already done. Feel the pose in the same way. Lengthen out the back leg, draw the tailbone in. Notice the energy in what's working, what's moving in the front leg in the way that we did last time. And then we're going to reach the hand down behind the leg to the floor if you can get the floor. Now, sometimes when you get the floor, you can reach the floor, but everything goes wrong. The bottom pings backwards and your chest turns to look to the floor. So if you're unable to keep yourself looking forwards, and if I'm honest, I think I need just a little bit of height to get a better shape there, then have your hand a little higher. So I've got my hand on a brick, the flat way round. Then I'm going to reach out wide with my upper arm, and I'm going to turn my upper arm and make a long line from hand to foot. And then as I sweep my arm back, I'm going to stand up. So breathe in and breathe out to make that motion. Feet to the front. We'll move the brick to the other side, move support to the other side. We don't often find that our two sides are the same. One side will have more challenge in it than the other very often. Bend the knee, bring yourself to the leaning position, turn the torso, straighten that leg away, and then bring your hand down behind your leg. Still turning the torso away from the floor. Knee presses back towards the arm to make sure that alignment of the front leg, is the same as before. Reach out wide with the upper arm and take the arm over with the palm facing towards the floor, fingertips reaching to the top corner of your ceiling, shoulder relaxed. And then breathe in and breathe out to come up. Bring your feet to the front and bring your feet together. We are going to do one last standing pose here. And it's Baddha Konasana. This mat moves around so much on this floor. So it's wide-legged and it's coming forwards. Again, if you anticipate you'll need something for your hands, have it there, chair or otherwise. Lift up through the legs. Lean forwards, keep lifting up through the legs. Bring your hands down underneath your shoulders. Bend your knees just a little bit. That will have an influence on how flat your feet can feel on the floor. So when I say flat, I don't mean flatten the arches. I mean the weight feels even on all four corners of your foot, if your foot was a rectangle. Then press through, particularly the heels, to straighten the legs. Make that action feel difficult. So you're pressing as if there's a weight on your lower back. Drawing the shoulders down, away from your ears. Reaching the sternum forward. So now we have straight lifted legs, straight extended torso. Now if you need to come up and go back into the pose, then you can do so now and just take a break. We're going to move our toes in slightly, one by one, and do the same work that we did in Uttanasana. So toes are in ever so slightly, and we lift up through the legs, and we explore how does that make the pose feel different. Where does it go with the stretch? If you're able to fold a little bit lower, then you can fold a little bit lower. Do not push towards any pain or sensation that feels like injury. If in doubt, fold less and wait and watch that sensation or move away from it. I'm aiming to lift up through the whole of the legs, to develop sensation and awareness of the whole of the legs. Now I'm going to straighten the arms and come back to a more comfortable version of the pose for yourself. And then I'm going to turn my feet to face the front, and then I'm going to bring my heels in, just a small amount. Still aiming to be flat on the floor with my feet, even though I've turned them out slightly. Lifting up through the legs, and then again, folding more into the pose if you're able to, but being aware of how that influences how your legs feel. This is a flat backed pose. This is a pose where the shoulders are comfortable. Aiming through our practice of yoga to build the strength and stamina that buys us time to explore the sensation in these poses. It is difficult to do that at the beginning. It can also be difficult to do that at the middle and the end. Bring yourself up and bring your feet in. So this developing of awareness is essentially the absolute core of yoga. But it is tricky. It's not an easy thing to do. And sometimes simply the skill and strength to stay in the pose is all that we have the mind space to do. And that's completely fine. But if you do practice yoga regularly and you build up this, have the knowledge of the pose and you build up strength, that buys you the space to feel the poses more deeply. We're moving into some seated poses now. So sit yourselves down on the mat and make sure you can reach your blocks. First pose we're going to do is Janusz Asana. So sit with your right leg out straight and your left leg bent. The foot should be next to your leg but not underneath the leg. And you want to have the whole of the outside calf supported on the floor. So if your leg is lifted, if that was the case for you, you need to take a cushion or a yoga block and support underneath there. Also be aware that as we come forwards, the knee may lift, so keep watching that. Place one hand in front of the bent leg, the other hand slightly behind you. Sit up, turn to try and move the navel to point to your big toe. Extend out in the front leg, don't let it roll out to one side or another. And then reach up with your bent leg arm and reach out for your foot. At this point, if you cannot reach your foot, then you're going to take a belt and you will put that around your foot so that you can hold the foot and still reach. I have the hand beside me still for my balance and control and to help me extend forwards. So I can push with this hand and it helps me to extend forwards. At this point, you want to notice whether the knee has lifted or the outer calf has lifted off the floor. Keep extending out from the inner groin to the inner knee. You'll remember that area we were focusing on in some of the other poses, that still needs to extend out. Now bring around the second hand to the foot or the belt and lift up. Draw the shoulders down and wide. So the arms don't need to be straight here. We're not going down fully yet, but the arms can be slightly bent. Lifting up. Even though I'm not looking at my leg, I am looking with my awareness to make sure it stays down. And then if you can, you're going to fold a little further, elbows out to the side. Bring your neck to be long, but don't close up the front of your neck. So keep the throat open, head in a neutral position as you lean forwards. There will be a tendency for one side of your back to be higher than the other. That's why we began by turning the navel towards the big toe. So try to notice what the skin feels like on your back. Try to even that up. There's a lot to watch. I'm watching my bent leg. I'm watching it for pain, which I certainly don't want to have in the knee. And if you have pain in the knee, then you need to come up and give yourself some extra support. But I'm also watching to make sure it hasn't lifted. I'm watching my straight leg to make sure it's still straight. And as I breathe, I'm feeling how the breath feels in my back ribs to give me information about whether one side is lifted, more than the other. I've just swallowed some dust and my voice has gone weird. So let's come up. I hope that my voice will go back to normal, which I'm sure it will. Bend up the other leg. It's very common to have one side feel different to the other in this pose. So if you need to support this side differently, principle's the same. Straight leg, foot beside but not underneath the leg. Outer calf down, hand in front of that calf, lift up, turn, reach up with the bent leg arm, extending all the way from the hip, upwards, come forwards, take the hand to the foot or your belt, extend the front of the body, your hand is beside you to help with that extension. Notice what's happening with this knee, don't allow it to lift. Bring the second hand around. Extension in the front body. Comfort in the shoulders. Noticing the turn in the body. So as I go down, this side of my body, the side near the bent leg, is going to tend to lag behind. So I need to work to keep those back ribs in. Keep them away from feeling tight like a drum. And because of that, I'm unlikely to be able to go quite as far on this side. But that's fine, because I'm still going to my maximum effort on each side. Noticing the back leg, the straight leg, the back of the straight leg. And then we're going to breathe in, take the hands off the belt or the foot, use your arms to push you up straight. Now the next pose, we're going to do Baddha Konasana, which is feet together and knees apart. Now this is not my best pose, so ideally the outer calf here would also be on the floor, which I can't show you because my body doesn't do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a single block and I'm going to sit on it, which will help to even out my legs. You may need to take more than one block. You may even need to sit on the seat of a chair and put the blocks under your feet. What we're aiming to achieve, and now that I'm on a block, I need bricks behind me. What we're aiming to achieve is to have level between hip and knee as best as we can. Now I don't get that here, you can see how my knees spring up, but as I press down with my hands and I press the soles of my feet together, I can get more of that, and I'm even taking a little bit of the weight off my bottom to give myself another ½ centimetre of lift. Make sure your tailbone is drawing in gently but definitely inwards, wide and open in the chest and the shoulders. Pressing the soles of the feet together, aiming to have the heels all the way together and the balls of the feet all the way together. I struggle to get the inner ball of my foot together, the big toe, but I'm trying. Now we're going to release that for a moment and take either a flat block or a brick and place it between your foot, or a book. If you have no actual yoga equipment, that's fine. Take something flat and sturdy and no thicker than this brick, which is about 2 inches, 5 centimetres thick, and place it between your feet. Put your hands over your ankles, and if your arms are long enough, you're going to pull slightly back to help support the lift of the body, and extend out from the inner groin to the inner knee. It's that action again. Now this will have lifted your knees up slightly, because it basically makes the pose more challenging. It asks the legs to draw back. So don't be surprised by that. For anybody's legs, it will change the opening. Tailbone draws in again. If you imagine the sitting bones that you're sat on, you're moving those slightly forwards and in as well. But lifted in the lower back, lifted in the whole of the back, neutral in the shoulders. There's a strong opening from inner groin to inner knee. And then release. Now the great thing about that technique is that it makes it feel easier to go back to the original. And I'm actually going to move down onto sitting on the floor again, because it will likely have brought me just a little bit more openness in my hips. So I'm bringing the soles of my feet together. I'm going to take my hands behind me again. I'm going to move my pubic bone as close to my heels as I can, but sometimes moving your pubic bone a little bit further away gives you more opening in your hips. So ultimately your heels are right up at your groin, but that might not be possible for you straight away. So I'm pressing my heels together, I'm pressing the soles of my feet together, and that is coming so much better now I've put the work in the first version of that. And then I'm going to release, and I'm going to show you one more way of doing this pose. Now you need to have a solid piece of furniture or something solid attached to the wall. So I trust this radiator, so I'm going to use that. You need to face it. I have also used the legs of my sofa or a heavy table, so those things work just as well. You come into Baddha Konasana, and then it needs to be fairly low down because I'm going to put my hands there, and I'm going to use that to slightly pull me forwards but also upwards. So I am pulling on there, and you need to be able to trust it, both because I don't want a bill for breaking parts of your house, but also because you don't want to hurt yourself by something coming away. If you were using the legs of a sofa, you might want to use your yoga belt to wrap around it. So something heavy and steady, and that helps you to lift forwards. Still keep your tailbone in and your front ribs in, but you can begin to fold down. Now as you fold down, you don't want your legs to lift. So what you can do is find some support that gives you a measure of how well your legs can do when you're sat upright. So my legs are onto those bricks to begin with, and then as I go forwards, if they lift off the bricks, I know that they've moved. So there's not a lot of pressure going through my hands, but there is some. It really does help to just give you something to work with, especially to keep these middle back ribs in rather than out. And this pose needs time and care. So I'm going to slowly watch the feelings in my legs. I'm going to keep making sure that my back feels comfortable, both the lower back so I'm not straining it, my hips, and then also my middle and upper back to make sure I am rounded forwards. Now ultimately in this, you lay all the way forwards with your chest more or less on the floor. That is not going to be where I get to today. More important is to have your back aligned, to absolutely stay away from injury in the inner legs, in the hips, in your lower back, and in your knees, which are particularly vulnerable places in this pose. Come back up again. So you can stay in that pose longer if you want to. So pause the video if you'd like to stay with that a little bit longer. But otherwise, draw your knees in. Just move away from whatever you were using so that you can fully straighten out the legs. And then we're going to lie down in relaxation, but I'm going to show you a pose called Baddha Konasana, which is reclining bound angle pose. So Baddha Konasana is the name of the pose we've just been doing, and we're going to recline in it. And I'm going to use a bolster, so you might want to use a rolled up cushion or a couple of rolled up pillows. I have my bolster here. It is a flattened out oval cushion, and I'm also going to be using a yoga block for my head, which can be replaced by a blanket or a cushion. So I bring my feet together and I bring the bolster up to my lower back. Then I lift myself up and I tuck my pelvis under, so there's a rolling under of the pelvis there, and then I come down onto my elbows. If you feel that pushes your waist up too much, you can move the bolster slightly further away, and I roll back and I take the block underneath my head. You may even need a couple of blocks. Place my elbows on the floor so that my shoulders can drape off the side of the support, and my hands and arms are fully supported. Now this is absolutely fine to do this flat on the floor without the bolster, either if you don't have appropriate support or if you don't like to be on the bolster. If your inner thighs feel like they've had quite enough work and they feel strained by this, take again either bricks or cushions will work again. You may need to use all the cushions in the house for this, and just place them underneath your outer thighs. Not so much that they actually lift you up, but so that they support your legs from feeling like they can fall any further down, and that should take any sense of strain out of the inner legs. And then for our relaxation, we're going to stay like this for 5 minutes, and then we will straighten the legs out and remain for 5 minutes more. Now it's time to change the leg position. So disturb your arms and just use your arms to lift each leg up. Part the feet so that your feet are flat on the floor, knees are bent. Adjust the back a little if you feel you need to. Move any equipment out of your way. Relax the arms once more and then straighten out the legs. Feet are slightly apart and feet are dropping out to the side. And we'll remain with straight legs for 5 minutes. begin to disturb yourself now, moving the attention first of all back to the outside. Then make small movements with your body, perhaps fingers and toes, whatever instinctively wants to move first. Your first large movement might be to move your arm onto your tummy and then the other arm. Then bend your knees up. Taking care of any furniture, equipment around you and keeping your eyes closed for the moment if you can. You're going to roll to your side, cradle your head with one arm and shade your eyes. And then that can be a good time to open your eyes and sit all the way up, using your arms to push you upright. Thank you very much for practicing with me today. If you're able to support my channel, then my Ko-fi details to make a small donation are at the bottom of the page. But whatever you're able to afford or not afford, I'm glad to offer this yoga to you. Thank you very much.